So here's the material we're going to see today. It's going to be dirt or dirt ground with a little bit of rocks popping out, and of course you can change the ground to be something else, to be like more like muddy water, or if you scale down the normal on this, then it will be like sandy rocks and stuff like that. So let's see the graph. So here's the graph. This will be our base dirt, which is basically the ground that goes underneath our rocks. We start with Perlin noise 1, add a histogram range, and add from the histogram range we will use a histogram scan, depending on either we want to mix it with the rocks or we want to make our ground mask. So let's say our base rocks. We start with a Perlin noise zoom. We're going to use a slope blur grayscale, and we're going to leave the mode to blur, and what this does is basically starts blurring upon itself, and it's like pushing the pixels around on itself. Then we're going to use a warp node so that we can start breaking a bit their shapes with a Perlin noise zoom. And after that we're going to use another slope blur grayscale so that we can start chipping away our stones so they actually look like stones. And we're going to use another Perlin noise zoom that just has a greater distance. Okay, all these three are Perlin noise zooms with different settings basically. So we have our base rocks. We can start working on the microsurface. So we're simply going to start by adding a moisture noise and blending it with subtract, so we start getting a little differentiation on the grayscale, and we can start adding way more micro detail. In this case I'll add a black and white spots 2, and I'm also going to pass it as a transformation, so I'm passing it 2 times on top of it. One blend will be with min darken and 0.15, and the other blend will be with overlay just 0.11. Okay, just to start adding a lot more surface noise, okay, and the microsurface detail. As you can see, I'll use a sharpen so that we can make all the little details pop out, and from over here we're basically ready to add it on the normals and combine with the rest of them. But before we see the rest of this, let's go back into our base dirt. Okay, so we have our base dirt. When we want to blend it with our rocks, we're going to use this, which basically blends the bigger shapes, so it blends the ground and basically blends the bigger shapes, not everything. Okay, as you can see, just max lighten, and instead of getting the rocks directly from here, I'm getting them after I've added a little bit of surface noise. From over here we can start working on our ground mask, okay, directly from base dirt and base rocks, and we're blending with divide both the rocks and the grounds. Then we use an invert grayscale because we want basically the opposite, and then we use a histogram scan so we get all the black areas will be ground and all the rest is going to be rocks, or the opposite. So from here we can go on and start creating our colors. I'm using the black and white spots 3 again. Okay, I'm running this through a gradient map, and I'm running the mix large through another gradient map, so I have my color for the rocks and I have the color for the ground. Okay, and I'm blending them together with the ground mask I have over here. Okay, with just blending mode copy, and we get something like this. Okay, the color for the rocks and the color for the ground. We pass this through another blend node, and this time we're going to add a little bit of pebbles over here. So we basically blend a little bit of pebbles and then go add now dirt, grease, edge highlight, and output it. Before we go continue on, let's see the ground microsurface. So with this we have our ground, and we only want to add microsurface only on the only on the ground. We're going to let our rocks untouched. Okay, so let's see the pebbles. The pebbles is actually a new node, and it's a simple one. We started with a simple shape, slope blue grayscale. We add a warp so that it starts breaking out the shape with pale noise too. Then add another slope blue grayscale with min. Okay, pale noise zoom once again. These are the values I'm using. Use a splatter node so that we can start placing them in random positions. Basically the values I'm using are these, and I've did a few checks so we can start even chipping them apart even more, but yeah, I just like it better the first way, so I'm going to delete this and I'm outputting this into height. But inside the splatter I also have my grid number exposed as a parameter. Okay, so I can now go into my upper node, into my upper graph over here into the pebbles, and change them. If I want more pebbles, I can change it and add more or less. So with the pebbles we can go directly, as we saw before, pass them through a gradient map and work on the color and add them on top of the other color, and then we can also add them into the height with max lighten. This is will determine how much the pebbles are going to show. You'll see it's a little bit it's just a little bit more detail rather than anything else. Okay, if I raise this up, they're going to pop even more. It depends entirely up to you how you want it to look. Okay, so we take this, we make it into a normal. The difference between those two, one has intensity of 10 because this has the larger shapes, okay, and this has a little bit microsurface on the rocks. I didn't want this to be too much intense, so that our rocks are look a little bit more polished, so that's why intensity is so low. And I use a normal combine. From over there we have basically create a curvature and ambient occlusion, which we're going to use to create dirt, grease, and edge highlights. So after we've mixed our color, we are ready for our dirt. To create the dirt mask we pass the curvature and ambient occlusion, okay, and play with the values of course. To create the dirt, the color for the dirt, I'm using Clouds 3. I'm running it through a warp node, so we get something like this. So it looks less procedural, of course. Yeah, I'm just recycling the black and white spots 3. Running through a gradient map. Okay, find a gradient that you like, and if you do not like, add a hue, saturation, lightness, and make it so that you like the saturation and how it looks. And then blend it with copy and use the dirt mask we just created, so we get a little bit of different color on the ground, that is, with just directly beneath our rocks. From over here I'm adding a little bit of grease on top of our rocks and on the edges. Okay, we just use grease node, and you need to pass the thickness. Of course we do not have thickness on this model, so I'm just using the curvature node. Okay, and we get the mask. You can play of course with this and it will have different results. I'm just going to keep it where it was. I'm using an anisotropic blur grayscale, so it also blurs out a little bit the grease, blurs out the mask. Okay, so because this is way too sharp for my liking. Of course, without the grease you can add another node, and we add that on top of all our other colors. Okay, and you will see the changes it does. It just, I think it makes them look a little bit more natural, like there is they are dirty from other sources other than the sun, or maybe somebody has stepped on them or something like that. Okay, and just use, it's just a little bit of gray. It's not directly black, it's not entirely black. Okay, and you can also add a little bit of color into this, it won't hurt. And then we go with edge highlight. So I'm basically just taking everything I have in my color up to this point, and I'm running it through a hue saturation light, and I'm lowering the saturation way down, so we get something that is like this, way too extreme white, not extreme white, more grayish. And I'm going to use a metal edge wear, tailor the settings to have way less intensity. Of course you can do the exact opposite. Okay, you need to add the curvature and ambient occlusion and add it on top of my rocks, and this will give us a few edge highlights. I think it's like this. Okay, you see it over here, and of course we can make this way more intense. You see that it changes the whole scene entirely. Of course you might have to mask out the ground, as you see, because the metal edge wear gives you the ground, so you might not like that. So I'm going to set it to back it what it was, and maybe give it a little bit more, something like that. Okay, and from over here we output it to the base color. And back to the other maps that are left. Okay, we see our normals are ready to be outputted after we have combined them, of course. And then we have left with the roughness and the height. For the height, I'm using the ground, basically the ground mask, or the ground microcephers, what goes directly out of here, and I'm outputting it into a histogram scan, and then output it into height. And with the histogram scan we can control their height and how exactly they will look. Okay, it's more flattened of ground, maybe somebody has stamped on it, or it was for construction. This is more rough. I think like this is also good, and you will see the differences on the height. Of course, if you go too much high up, you will see that the rocks will start, the ground will be leveled in at the same level or at the same height, and the rocks will be lowered down. So I'm going to go back to what it was. Was this? Not this. Okay, 0.34. It's what I'll use. And for the metallic, of course, there is no metallic, so we just output a black color. And for the roughness, we're getting from after we have added the pebbles, we pass it through a high pass grayscale, so we lower all the values, we cut basically all the high pass, running through a levels, add the clouds too, so that we break out, because this looks a little bit uniformly to me. I'm adding a clouds through noise, with overlay. Okay, play with the opacity, and then it's ready to be outputted into roughness. And you will get something like this. Keep in mind that this is just 1K resolution, because recording and having it a larger resolution is going to give me nightmares. Okay, and you get something looking like this. And as I said, of course, you can change the ground to be something completely else, or the rocks to be something different. So you know what to do. Like and subscribe if you want to see more material breakdowns.